Hong Kong, March 1984. A roaring crowd. A martial arts demonstration that would become legend, and one moment that would define what honor truly meant. The air inside the Kowloon Bay Sports Arena was thick with anticipation. Over 8,000 spectators had packed the venue to witness what promoters called the East Meets West Martial Arts Spectacular, a cross-cultural exhibition featuring some of the most skilled fighters from across the globe. Among them was Jackie Chan, already a rising international icon, known not just for his acrobatic fight choreography, but for bringing a sense of joy and humanity to martial arts cinema. But on this night, joy would be tested. Jackie stood backstage, rolling his shoulders, loosening his wrists. He wasn't nervous. He'd performed in front of cameras and crowds countless times. But something felt different tonight. The energy was charged, electric, almost dangerous. Maybe it was the political climate. Maybe it was the weight of representing not just himself, but his people, his culture, his flag. He didn't know it yet, but in less than an hour, that flag would be trampled, and he would be forced to choose between silence and sacrifice. Jackie Chan was never supposed to be a fighter in the traditional sense. Born Chan Kong Sang in 1954, he was molded by the Peking Opera School, a brutal training ground where children were taught acrobatics, martial arts, singing and acting through relentless discipline. By the time he was a teenager, Jackie had already mastered more physical skills than most athletes would in a lifetime. But the opera was dying, the world was changing, and Jackie, like many of his classmates, had to find a new stage. That stage became Hong Kong cinema. By 1984, Jackie had already starred in groundbreaking films like Snake in the Eagle's Shadow, Drunken Master, and Project A. His style was revolutionary. Instead of the stoic, invincible hero popularized by Bruce Lee, Jackie played the everyman, clumsy, comedic, vulnerable, yet incredibly skilled. He made audiences laugh before he made them gasp. But beneath the pratfalls and stunts was a man deeply connected to his roots, a man who carried the weight of Chinese identity during a time when Hong Kong's future was uncertain, when the handover to China loomed on the horizon, and when cultural pride was both a shield and a sword. And on this night, that pride would be tested in a way he never imagined. Benny Urquidez was a legend in his own right. Born in Texas, raised in California, he was a kickboxing world champion, with an undefeated record that bordered on mythical. Fast, brutal, precise, Benny fought like a machine built for destruction. He'd fought in Japan, Thailand, Europe, and now Hong Kong, always adapting, always winning. But Benny was also a showman, and tonight, he'd been given a role, the Western antagonist, the foil to Jackie's Eastern hero. It was all choreographed, all part of the spectacle. A friendly exhibition, a cultural exchange, a celebration of martial arts. At least, that's what everyone believed. Backstage, Benny paced like a caged animal. He wasn't nervous, he was focused. His team surrounded him, wrapping his hands, adjusting his gear, and in the corner of the room, draped over a chair, was a small American flag. It was a prop, a symbol, a visual element meant to emphasize the East versus West narrative. But symbols, Jackie would soon learn, are never just symbols. The lights dimmed, the crowd roared. The announcer's voice boomed through the arena, first in Cantonese, then in English. Ladies and gentlemen, from Hollywood, California, the undefeated kickboxing champion of the world, Benny the Jet Urquidez. Benny entered to a wave of cheers and jeers. He shadowboxed, threw spinning kicks into the air, played to the crowd, confident, dominant, untouchable. Then came Jackie's introduction, and now Hong Kong's own, the Dragon, Jackie Chan. The response was deafening. Jackie walked out with his signature smile, waving to the audience, bowing respectfully. He wore a simple black training uniform. No flashy colors, no ego. Just a man ready to honor the art. The two men met at center stage. They bowed, shook hands. The crowd applauded. And then the demonstration began. It started beautifully. Jackie and Benny exchanged choreographed techniques, high kicks, blocks, counters, flips. It was poetry in motion, a dialogue between two different philosophies of combat. Jackie's fluidity against Benny's power, Eastern grace against Western aggression. The crowd loved it. For nearly 20 minutes, the two men moved as if they'd trained together for years. Benny would launch a powerful roundhouse kick, and Jackie would duck under it with balletic precision, countering with a spinning back fist that stopped inches from Benny's jaw. The audience gasped at the near misses, cheered at the acrobatics, and marveled at the control both men displayed. This wasn't just fighting. This was art. This was what martial arts was supposed to be, a conversation between warriors, a test of skill without malice, a celebration of human capability. But something was brewing beneath the surface. Perhaps it was the pressure of performing in front of such a massive crowd. Perhaps it was the political undertones of the East versus West marketing. Or perhaps it was simply the combustible nature of pride, meeting pride in a space where only one narrative could dominate at a time. Then, without warning, everything changed. It happened during a transition. Jackie had just executed a spinning back kick, landing gracefully as the crowd erupted. Benny reset, preparing for the next sequence. And then he reached down and pulled out a small Chinese flag that had been placed near the edge of the stage as part of the decor. The audience went silent. You could feel the air being sucked out of the arena. Benny held it up, grinning, playing to the crowd like a wrestler taunting his opponent. It was supposed to be a joke, a bit of theatrical heel behavior to pump up the drama, but then he did it. He dropped the flag and stepped on it. The arena exploded, not with cheers, but with gasps, boos, and shouts of outrage. Thousands of voices rose in protest, a wave of shock and anger rippling through the crowd like an earthquake. Jackie froze. His smile vanished. His body went rigid. Every instinct in him screamed to move, to react, to do something. But he was locked in place, paralyzed by disbelief. Did that just happen? He looked at Benny, whose grin faltered for just a moment, long enough to reveal that maybe, just maybe, he hadn't thought this through. But the damage was done. Time seemed to slow. Jackie's mind raced. This is a demonstration. It's choreographed. We're supposed to be promoting unity, not conflict. But he stepped on my flag. He disrespected my people, my country, my identity. If I do nothing, I'm complicit. If I do something, I might start a riot. He could feel the eyes of 8,000 people on him. The weight of their expectations, their pride, their pain. Some were shouting at Benny. Others were shouting at Jackie to do something. The security team was on alert, ready to intervene if the situation spiraled out of control. But Jackie knew that if security stepped in, if the demonstration ended in chaos, the only story anyone would remember would be the disrespect, the insult, the humiliation. And that story would echo far beyond this arena. It would become a symbol itself of weakness, of submission, of a culture that could be trampled without consequence. In that frozen moment, Jackie wasn't just Jackie Chan, the movie star. He was the son of refugees who had fled to Hong Kong, seeking safety. He was the product of an opera school that had beaten discipline and pride into him from childhood. He was the representative of millions of Chinese people who had seen their culture dismissed, their traditions mocked, their identity questioned by the West for generations. This wasn't about a piece of cloth. This was about every Chinese person who had ever been told they didn't matter. Every immigrant who had been treated as less than. Every artist who had fought to be seen as more than a stereotype. The flag on the ground wasn't just fabric and dye. It was his grandfather's stories of the revolution. It was his parents' struggles to build a life in a city that wasn't quite theirs. It was the weight of 5,000 years of history being crushed under the boot of casual disrespect. And in that moment, Jackie realized that silence would be louder than any punch he could throw. And then, quietly, Almost instinctively, Jackie walked forward. He didn't run, didn't charge, didn't throw a punch. He walked, slowly, deliberately. Every step measured, every movement controlled. The crowd watched in breathless silence. Benny stood frozen, suddenly unsure of what he'd unleashed. Jackie bent down, picked up the flag, and held it against his chest. For a moment, he just stood there, cradling it like something sacred, and then he looked up at Benny, not with rage, not with hatred, but with something far more powerful, disappointment. The crowd erupted in applause, not celebration, something deeper, relief, gratitude, recognition. They understood what Jackie had just done. He hadn't escalated. He hadn't attacked, he had reclaimed. Jackie turned to Benny, his expression calm but unyielding, and said something only those closest could hear. "We finish this, but with respect." Benny's face changed. The showman mask dropped. And for the first time that night, he nodded, not as a performer, but as a martial artist. What followed was no longer a demonstration. It was a conversation conducted through movement. Jackie and Benny resumed their exchange, but this time, there was weight behind every strike. Jackie's kicks came faster, sharper, each one a statement. "You don't disrespect what I stand for." Benny responded in kind, his punches heavier, his defense tighter. It wasn't anger, it was intensity. Mutual respect forged through combat. The choreography was abandoned. What emerged instead was something raw, something honest. Jackie moved with a ferocity the crowd had never seen from him before. His trademark playfulness was gone, replaced by laser-focused precision. He swept Benny's legs, forcing him to the ground, then extended a hand to help him up, a gesture that spoke louder than words. Benny, to his credit, accepted the hand and returned the intensity. His kicks became more deliberate, his strikes more respectful of the space between performance and reality. This was no longer about winning or losing, it was about acknowledgement, about two men from different worlds recognizing that some things are bigger than spectacle. The audience watched in stunned silence, then erupted into cheers as Jackie and Benny moved through sequences that felt less like fighting and more like a dialogue. When Jackie executed a flying kick that stopped millimeters from Benny's face, the American fighter didn't flinch. Instead, he bowed his head slightly. An unspoken apology. When Benny returned with a spinning back elbow that Jackie narrowly dodged, he too paused, acknowledging the skill and the restraint. And when it was over, when both men stood center stage, breathing hard, sweat dripping from their faces, Jackie extended his hand. Benny took it. They bowed deeply to one another, and then together they turned to the crowd and bowed as one. The arena exploded, not with the hollow roar of entertainment, but with something more profound: appreciation, respect, understanding. Because everyone there knew they had just witnessed something rare, not a fight, not a performance, but a moment of truth. Backstage, after the demonstration, Jackie sat alone in his dressing room, the flag still folded carefully beside him. His hands were shaking, not from exertion, but from the adrenaline finally catching up to him. Benny entered quietly, still in his gear, and sat down across from him. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then Benny broke the silence. "I didn't think," he said quietly. I didn't think." Jackie looked at him, then nodded slowly. "Symbols matter," he said. "To you it was a prop. To them it was everything." Benny exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I know that now." They sat in silence for another moment. Then Benny extended his hand. "Thank you," he said, "for not making me the villain." Jackie took his hand and shook it firmly. "You're not a villain," he said. "You're a fighter who made a mistake. We all do." And with that, the two men parted ways, not as enemies, not as rivals, but as martial artists who had learned something that night that no amount of training could teach. In the years that followed, Jackie rarely spoke about that night. When journalists asked about the East meets West spectacular, he would smile and deflect, talking instead about the choreography, the crowd, the energy of Hong Kong in the mid-1980s. But he never mentioned the flag. He never named Benny. He never turned the incident into a story of heroism or victimhood. Because for Jackie, the moment wasn't about him. It was about what the flag represented. And he understood, perhaps better than anyone, that some things don't need to be explained. They just need to be honored. Years later, in a rare candid interview, a journalist pressed him about rumors of an incident during that 1984 demonstration. Jackie paused, looked out the window, and said simply, "Sometimes the best fight is the one you don't need to explain. You just have to show people what you stand for, and then you move forward." The journalist nodded, sensing that was all. Jackie would say, "And it was, but those who were there that night, the 8,000 people packed into the Kowloon Bay Sports Arena, they remember. They remember the silence when the flag hit the ground. They remember Jackie's walk. They remember his restraint, and they remember that in a world obsessed with spectacle, with drama, with manufactured conflict, Jackie Chan reminded everyone what it truly meant to be a martial artist. Not invincible, not untouchable, just unbreakable. Because honor, Jackie proved that night, isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about what you're willing to stand up for when it would be easier to walk away. And that lesson, that quiet, powerful lesson, would echo far beyond the walls of that arena, far beyond the borders of Hong Kong, and far beyond the career of one man who simply refused to let a symbol be trampled. The flag incident of 1984 was never officially documented. No footage exists, no press coverage, just whispers, memories, and a story passed down among those who witnessed it. And maybe that's how it should be. Because the truth is, Jackie Chan didn't need the world to know what he did that night. He only needed to know it himself, and he did.